Rain clawed against the windows of the small yellow house on Riverside Lane, the sound sharp and relentless, as if the night itself refused to let go. Inside, the air was thick with the ghost of an argument. Half-finished sentences, the taste of something bitter left hanging between two people who had already said too much. Clara Weston stood by the kitchen sink, her hands trembling around a chipped coffee mug that had long gone cold. She wasn't crying. Not yet. She had learned long ago that tears never softened Dylan Hart when he was angry. They only fueled him. He stood across the room, pacing in slow, restless strides, his voice tight but calm, the kind of calm that made her more afraid than shouting ever could. "You're really going to do this again? Walk out every time things get hard?" His tone carried that practiced disbelief, the one that made her doubt herself. "I'm not walking out, Dylan, I'm done," she said quietly. The words were simple, final, but saying them aloud made her chest tighten. "You don't get to decide when I go or who I see. You don't get to watch me all the time." Dylan stopped pacing. The rain outside seemed to pause with him. His jaw clenched. "You think I'm the bad guy," he said, voice soft, almost broken. "After everything I've done for you." Clara looked down at her mug, afraid that meeting his eyes would unravel her resolve. "You didn't do it for me," she whispered. "You did it to own me." That did it. The silence broke like glass. Dylan's hand slammed against the table, the sound echoing through the small kitchen. She flinched. He didn't hit her, not this time, but the air between them felt bruised. She grabbed her coat from the chair, slipping it on with shaking hands. Dylan didn't move. His breathing was slow, controlled, but his eyes followed her every motion. "You walk out that door," he said softly, "and you won't come back. You know that, right?" Clara hesitated at the threshold. The rain beyond the doorway looked almost cleansing. She glanced at him one last time, the man she had once believed she could fix. "I know," she said, and stepped into the storm. The door slammed behind her. For a moment Dylan stayed frozen in the kitchen, his hand still resting on the table. Then he exhaled slowly, running his fingers through his hair, muttering something under his breath. Outside, headlights flashed past on the wet road. He moved to the window, watching her car pull away, the red taillights disappearing into the sheets of rain. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, hollow, unreadable. Hours passed before the storm began to ease. The clock ticked past midnight. The house felt emptier than usual, like something inside it had been ripped away. Dylan sat in the dark living room, the TV muted, cigarette smoke curling around him. He replayed their fight again and again, rearranging her words until he could almost believe she'd been the one losing control. That was what he was good at, making himself the victim. By morning, her car hadn't returned. At 9, her sister Emily called. She'd been expecting Clara for breakfast, but her phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, she was calling Dylan, her voice tight with worry. He told her they'd argued, that Clara had stormed off, said she needed space. He sounded calm, remorseful. "You know how she gets," he added gently. "Emotional." When Emily filed a missing persons report that evening, the rain had already stopped, leaving the roads washed clean, as if the night wanted to erase its own evidence. Detective Lena Rourke arrived just before dusk. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She took one look at Dylan and knew something was off. Not in what he said, but in what he didn't. He invited her in with a practiced politeness, showing her around the house, answering every question as though he'd rehearsed it. She left around 11, he told her. Said she couldn't do this anymore. I didn't stop her. I thought she'd cool off. He forced a smile. She always does. Lena glanced at the sink. The mug was still there, a faint lipstick mark along the rim. You didn't go after her? He shook his head. No. I figured she needed space. Mind if we look around? He didn't, or at least pretended not to. The officers combed the small property. No signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints in the backyard mud except his own. Her phone, purse, and keys were gone. It looked like she'd simply walked away. But Lena's instincts hummed with unease. People don't vanish in the middle of a thunderstorm without reason. And men like Dylan, the ones who smiled too easily, whose tempers hid behind charm, always had something to hide. That night, the search began. Volunteers fanned out through the woods behind the house, flashlights slicing through darkness. They found tire tracks on the side road leading toward the river, but the rain had blurred their direction. Dogs caught a faint scent near the water, then lost it. By the third day, the town had grown quiet. Clara's picture hung on telephone poles, the same photo she'd used for her nursing ID, smiling, alive, unaware of what would come. Dylan appeared on local news, his voice breaking as he begged for her return. "Clara, if you can hear this, please come home. I'm sorry for everything." Viewers saw a grieving boyfriend. Detective Rourke saw control. Subtle, deliberate, rehearsed. A week later, a fisherman found a piece of cloth caught on a rock downstream. It was red, torn, possibly from a coat. Forensics confirmed it was Clara's. That was all they ever found. No body, no car, no trace. The investigation dragged on for months, every lead dissolving into nothing. The longer she stayed missing, the easier it became for the town to move on. Dylan did not. He stayed in the same house, mowed the same lawn, drove the same truck. Neighbors said he looked broken, a man haunted by guilt or grief, depending on who you asked. When questioned again, he kept his story straight. They fought. She left. She never came back. There was no evidence to say otherwise. By the time the case went cold, the police files were stacked neatly in a drawer labeled Weston Clara Missing. Detective Rourke never stopped thinking about it. She would revisit the file every few months, tracing the same photographs, rereading Dylan's statements, wondering what she'd missed. Dylan, meanwhile, learned to smile again. He quit smoking, fixed up his shop, went back to church on Sundays. To anyone watching, he was a man trying to rebuild, a survivor of heartbreak. But on quiet nights, when the rain returned and the streets shone slick under the porch light, he would sit by the window and listen. Sometimes he swore he could hear the echo of her footsteps on the porch, the faint click of her car door. He would whisper her name once, softly, as though daring the dark to answer. It never did. A year passed before the town stopped whispering Dylan Hart's name. The flyers of Clara Weston had long peeled from lampposts, their edges curling like dead leaves. The case had become another cold file in a police drawer, another mystery people preferred to forget. But in small towns, forgetting and forgiving often meant the same thing, and Dylan had quietly learned to wear both. He sold the yellow house and moved into a small cottage at the edge of town, the kind with creaking floors and too many windows. He started working at a local garage, fixing other people's broken things because it was easier than fixing his own. He smiled more now, or at least knew when to. He learned to talk about Clara without flinching, to shrug and say, "I still don't understand what happened." The lie came easy, smooth as breath. It was at the farmer's market one Saturday morning that he met Erin Lowe. She was carrying a paper bag of apples and laughing with someone when one rolled out, bouncing across the pavement. Dylan caught it before it hit the curb. Their eyes met. Hers soft and quick to trust, his steady and practiced. She thanked him with that kind of smile that reached the edges of her eyes. He offered to walk her to her car. Erin was a teacher at the local elementary school, the kind who stayed late to decorate bulletin boards and left encouraging notes on students' desks. Her kindness wasn't loud. It was patient, deliberate. She had been divorced 2 years and still flinched when someone raised their voice too suddenly. Dylan noticed that right away. He noticed everything. Their first date was quiet, just coffee and talk that stretched easily into the afternoon. She told him she believed everyone deserved a second chance. He told her he didn't usually talk this much. Both things were true in their own way. By the end of the month, she was keeping a toothbrush at his place. By the end of 2, she'd stopped locking her phone around him. The speed of it scared her sometimes, but Dylan's calm steadiness made her feel safe, even when she didn't fully understand why. He said all the right things, soft apologies when he got distant, gentle touches when she doubted herself. He made her believe that she'd been the one to heal him. Mark never believed it. He'd been Erin's friend since college and had seen too many men charm her into silence. "You don't even know this guy," he told her one evening over drinks. "He just showed up. No family, no past, no anything." Erin stirred her straw. "That's not fair," she said. "He lost someone. You'd understand if you'd been through what he has." "Lost someone how?" She hesitated. Dylan had told her about Clara once. Only once, in the middle of the night when he couldn't sleep. He'd said she'd disappeared, that it nearly destroyed him, that the police never cleared his name. The pain in his voice had sounded too real to doubt. "His girlfriend went missing," Erin said softly. "People blamed him, but there was no proof. He's not that person anymore." Mark stared at her. "You think men like that just change?" Erin looked away. "I think people can be broken and still good." She didn't see Dylan standing by the doorway of the bar, watching them through the glass before turning away into the night. The next morning she found flowers on her car windshield. A note tucked beneath the bouquet read, "For all the things I never said last night. D." She smiled despite herself, choosing to believe it was just affection, not apology. Dylan had a gift for turning suspicion into guilt. When she questioned him about his past, about why he never visited family, he would grow quiet, wounded, and she would end up apologizing. "I just want to know you," she'd say. He would take her hands, kiss her knuckles. "You do," he'd whisper. "You're the only one who ever really did." They became inseparable after that. Weekends were spent driving to the coast, his arm over the seat, her laughter filling the cab. He showed her how to fish, how to fix a flat tire, how to keep a secret. In her classroom, she kept a small photograph of him hidden behind a stack of papers, a quiet rebellion against her own doubts. But small cracks began to show. Once, when she was late coming home, she found him waiting in the driveway, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You didn't answer," he said. "I called 4 times. "I was grading papers," she said, forcing a smile. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Just remember to let me know next time. I worry, that's all." She promised she would. That night, as she showered, she noticed her phone missing from the counter. It reappeared minutes later on the nightstand, exactly where she hadn't left it. Dylan was in bed, pretending to be asleep. She didn't say anything. Weeks passed. The tension ebbed and flowed like a tide she learned to move with. When he was gentle, he was perfect, the kind of man who cooked her breakfast and brought coffee to her bedside. When he was angry, he never shouted. He just looked at her in a way that made her small, as if her existence depended on his forgiveness. Mark noticed the bruises first. Not real bruises, but the kind that hid in her voice. "He's changing you," he said one afternoon when she stopped by his classroom. "You used to laugh more." "I'm happy, Mark," she insisted. "He makes me feel safe." Mark's eyes softened. "Then why do you sound scared?" She didn't have an answer. That evening, Dylan took her to dinner at a quiet restaurant outside of town. He was affectionate, attentive, the version of himself she loved most. As they ate, he mentioned Clara's name again, casually, as if testing her reaction. "You ever think about her?" she asked. He looked up from his glass. "Every day," he said, then smiling faintly, "But not the way you think. I learned a lot from losing her." "What did you learn?" He reached across the table, brushing her wrist. "That love is a choice. And when you make it, you don't get to undo it." The way he said it made her breath catch. He wasn't threatening her, not directly, but something about the weight of his words stayed with her long after they drove home. Later that night, while he slept, she sat at the kitchen table scrolling through old news archives on her phone. Clara Weston's name appeared like a ghost on the screen. Local nurse missing, boyfriend questioned, released. There was a photo. The smile was familiar. She traced the face with her thumb, feeling a chill she couldn't explain. She turned off the phone when Dylan stirred in the next room. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, she had convinced herself she was overreacting. People disappear all the time, she told herself. Sometimes grief just changes a person. But when she went to make coffee, she noticed the laptop on the counter was open, her browsing history erased. Dylan walked in, kissing her temple as if nothing were wrong. "You're up early," he said. She smiled tightly. "Couldn't sleep." He poured himself a cup, eyes unreadable. "You should try. You look tired." She watched him walk away, his reflection fractured in the kitchen window, and something deep in her gut whispered that she'd made a mistake she couldn't undo. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft at first, then steady, as if the sky remembered what it had done a year ago. And somewhere under the sound of it, Erin thought she heard a woman's voice whisper her name. It began with a documentary. Erin hadn't meant to watch it. It was a Friday night, rain sliding down the windows like tears, Dylan out late working on a customer's truck. The quiet inside the cottage felt hollow, almost watchful. She scrolled through streaming options until she landed on one of those true crime series she liked, Vanished Without a Trace, Season 2. The first episode was titled, The Nurse Who Never Came Home. She didn't think much of it at first. The reenactment showed a smiling woman named Clara Weston, a small-town nurse who disappeared after an argument with her boyfriend. There were interviews with neighbors, fragments of police footage, a detective's voice explaining how no one had seen her since that night. Then came a clip of the boyfriend's photo, his face blurred for privacy. But even blurred, the shape of the jaw, the tilt of the mouth, the posture, it was unmistakable. Erin felt something cold crawl through her. She froze the screen and stared. The actor playing him was tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered. The resemblance wasn't exact, but it didn't need to be. The cadence of his speech in the reenactment matched Dylan's. The way he said, "She walked out and that was it." Her heart thudded once, hard. She told herself it couldn't be. There were hundreds of men like Dylan, thousands. Clara Weston was just a name. Still, she Googled it. The search bar filled itself before she'd even finished typing. Clara Weston missing case 2012. There it was. The same article she'd seen months ago. The one she had told herself to forget. A missing nurse. A boyfriend who was never charged. A case that went cold. Her coffee went untouched as she read every line. When Dylan came home past midnight, smelling faintly of engine oil and rain, she quickly shut the laptop and pretended to be half asleep. He leaned down and kissed her hair. "You're still up?" "Just grating," she murmured. He smiled in the dark. "You work too hard." She smiled back, though her pulse wouldn't slow. Over the next few days, the feeling didn't fade. It grew. Every gesture, every word he said seemed to echo something from the documentary. When he touched her neck, she remembered the detective describing Clara's bruises that looked like love turned violent. When he said, "You know I'd never let anything happen to you," she wondered if Clara had heard the same words. One evening, she decided to confront him, lightly, carefully. "You ever heard of a woman named Clara Weston?" she asked over dinner. Dylan's fork paused mid-air. It was only for a second, but she saw it. The stiffness, the flicker of recognition. Then his expression softened. "Why?" "She was in that documentary I watched about disappearances. She was from around here, I think." He set the fork down gently. "Yeah, I remember that name. Terrible thing." "Did you know her?" A smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone around here knew her. Small town." He reached across the table, his thumb brushing her wrist, grounding, intimate. "Don't watch that stuff, Erin. It'll get in your head." She nodded, forcing a smile. But that night she lay awake, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, waiting for it to falter, waiting for anything that would tell her who he really was. The next morning, she found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address, just her name written in neat slanted handwriting. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He did it once. Don't let him do it again. Her stomach dropped. There was no signature, no clue, She looked around the empty street, the trees heavy with early summer leaves, but no one was there. Just the sound of a lawnmower 2 houses down. She hid the letter in a drawer before Dylan came home. That evening, she tried to act normal. She made dinner, smiled when he talked, laughed at his stories, but every time his hand brushed hers, she felt the words burning through her chest. When she finally asked, "Did you ever love someone before me?" He gave her that same practiced smile. "I told you about Clara. You never said her name." He looked at her a long time. "Does it matter?" She didn't answer. He leaned forward, voice soft but steady. "People like to talk. They twist things. That's what happened with her. She left and somehow I became the villain." She swallowed. "Why would someone send me this?" "What?" She almost told him about the letter but stopped. "Nothing. Just forget it." He watched her closely. Too closely. That night, while he showered, she searched his dresser. Every drawer was neat, too neat. Folded shirts, organized tools, nothing personal. But at the bottom of the last drawer, beneath a pile of old rags, she found a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of a woman, blonde, smiling. Clara. She snapped it shut, heart racing, and shoved it back before he returned. When she turned around, he was standing in the doorway. "What are you doing?" She froze. "Looking for a charger." He smiled faintly, towel around his neck. "You didn't have to go digging." "I wasn't." He stepped closer, his eyes unreadable. Then, just as quickly, he kissed her forehead. "Next time, just ask." He walked past her, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall. She didn't breathe until she heard the bedroom door close. The next day she drove to the police station, letter in her purse, hoping for someone to listen. Detective Lena Rourke wasn't on duty, but the receptionist said she'd been the lead on Clara Weston's case years ago. "She still drops by sometimes," the woman said. "She never really let it go." Erin left her name and number. That evening her phone buzzed with a private number. She almost didn't answer. "This is Detective Rourke," the voice said, gravelly, calm. "You left a message about Clara Weston?" Erin hesitated, watching the window where the last light of day filtered through. "I think my boyfriend knew her." "Name?" "Dylan Hart." A pause. "Say that again." "Dylan Hart." Another silence, heavier this time. "Where are you right now, Ms. Lowe?" "At home." "Is he with you?" "No." "Don't be alone with him if you can help it." The words hit her like a slap. "Do you think he—" "I think he's dangerous," Rourke said quietly. "I could never prove it before. Maybe you can." Erin's hands trembled as she hung up. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The framed photos, the neat kitchen, the illusion of safety. She opened the drawer and pulled out the letter again. The paper smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, old and familiar. When Dylan came home, he was in a good mood. He poured her wine, told her about a customer who'd tried to pay with a fake check. He laughed, that easy, charming laugh that made her doubt herself. "You okay?" he asked finally, watching her. She forced a smile. "Just tired." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You work too hard," he said again. That night, when he fell asleep, she lay beside him, eyes open, listening to the rain beginning to fall. It was softer this time, almost gentle, but it carried the same rhythm as before, the same sound that had swallowed Clara Weston a year ago. Erin reached for her phone and began recording. She didn't know exactly what she was capturing. His breathing, her fear, the house settling in the storm. But something inside her told her she might need proof, because somewhere deep down she already knew the truth. Dylan hadn't changed. The pattern was returning. The storm rolled in without warning, sheets of rain sweeping across the quiet streets of Fairview, the same kind of night that had swallowed Clara Weston years ago. Inside the small house on Maple Drive, Erin Lowe's phone lay buzzing unanswered on the kitchen counter, its screen lighting up with missed calls from her friend Mark. The police would later mark 9:37 p.m. as the last known time anyone heard from her. But by then, Dylan Hart was already rehearsing his story. When officers arrived the next morning, the front door was unlocked, the lights still on. Erin's car was gone, but her purse and wallet were still inside. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no forced entry, just a single overturned mug on the floor and a faint scent of perfume hanging in the air. Dylan greeted them with the same fragile charm that had once fooled an entire town. His voice cracked perfectly in the right places. She left after an argument, he stammered, running a trembling hand through his hair. She said she needed space. I thought she just... His words broke, replaced by a shaky breath. I thought she'd come back. Detective Lena Briggs, now a few years older and harder around the eyes, watched him quietly. She'd seen this scene before. Same sorrow, same confusion, same man. Only the woman was different. Mr. Hart, she said softly, notebook in hand. What was the argument about? He hesitated. Just, small things. Work, bills, the usual. Nothing serious? No, she was tired lately. I think the school stress was getting to her. Lena didn't write that down. She didn't need to. She was already writing something else in her head. A pattern, not a note. Outside, a few neighbors stood under umbrellas whispering. One of them, Mrs. Keller, mentioned hearing shouting around 9. A door slammed, she said, and then nothing. Just the rain. By noon, the case had a familiar rhythm. The missing posters, the press conference, the teary plea for help. Dylan stood before cameras, his voice trembling, his eyes red. If anyone knows where Erin is, please bring her home. Reporters called him the unluckiest man in Fairview. 2 women gone, both his lovers. Lena called him something else entirely. Later that night in the precinct, she sat across from Dylan in the same interrogation room she had used years ago for Clara S. case. The hum of the fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. You've had this happen before, she began carefully, flipping open an old folder. Clara Weston, right? His jaw tightened. I told you everything back then. You had no proof. I didn't, she said, but I do now. He blinked, his composure flickering. What are you talking about? She slid a photo across the table, Erin and Dylan smiling in front of his car, the same make and model he'd owned when Clara disappeared. The same dent on the passenger door. You kept the car, she said. Why? Dylan gave a hollow laugh. You think that proves something? No, Lena said. But it tells me you don't let go of things easily. For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind that stretches thin, ready to snap. Dylan leaned back, masking unease with a practiced smirk. You've got no evidence, detective. Just like last time. Maybe not yet, she replied. But this time, you're not walking away. He left the station that evening without being charged. There was no body, no crime scene, nothing tangible to hold him on. But Lena's instincts screamed louder than any evidence file ever could. Over the following days, she retraced Erin's steps, her classroom, her favorite cafe, the path she took on her evening walks. Everywhere she went, Lena found small traces of fear. Erin had confided in a few people, her colleague Janice, her friend Mark. She'd said she felt watched, that Dylan's moods had shifted, that sometimes she'd wake at night to find him standing over her, just staring. Mark told Lena about the letter, the one that said, he did it once. Don't let him do it again. Erin had shown it to him the week before she vanished. He'd begged her to leave, to call the police. She hadn't. She said she didn't want to believe it, Mark whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. She said he'd changed. Lena stared at the letter, now sealed in an evidence bag. Her gut twisted. Whoever sent it had known something, maybe even seen something. Meanwhile, Dylan played his part with unnerving precision. He spoke softly about Erin to reporters, attended candlelight vigils, and even comforted Erin's mother when she broke down in tears. I loved her, he said, voice trembling. More than anything. But behind closed doors, he was different, cold, controlled. He scrubbed the floors twice that week, rearranged the living room, replaced Erin's toothbrush. It was as though he were erasing her one object at a time. Lena began digging deeper, reopening Clara's file officially under Erin's name. Both women were last seen after arguments. Both left behind personal belongings. Both were dating the same man. And then came the break. A small, almost meaningless detail that made everything align. A traffic camera on Highway 16 caught Dylan's car around 11:48 p.m., the night Erin vanished, heading toward the old quarry, headlights cutting through the rain. He had told police he was home by 10 That was all Lena needed. She called for a search. The next morning, officers combed the area near the quarry. The rain had softened the ground, and what they found wasn't a body but something just as telling. A necklace, caked in mud, engraved with the letter E. When the evidence was brought to Dylan's doorstep, his expression didn't falter. "That's not hers," he said too calmly. But Lena saw the twitch in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes, the faintest tremor of a man losing control of his own performance. That night, alone in her office, Lena reopened a final envelope from Clara S. case, an old photo of her standing by the same quarry. She looked at the rain streaking down the window, feeling the eerie symmetry of it all. 2 women, same man, same storm. The phone rang. It was a deputy from the quarry. "Detective, you better come down here," he said. "We've found something." Lena's heart thudded once, hard. She grabbed her coat and keys. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then quietly, "It's a grave. Fresh soil. 2 sets of remains." Outside, thunder rolled again. And as Lena drove into the night, her headlights slicing through the downpour, she realized the truth wasn't buried. It had been waiting. Waiting for her to find it. The rain had finally stopped by dawn, leaving the ground heavy and slick around the quarry. Police tape fluttered weakly in the morning wind as detectives and forensic teams moved with grim precision, their boots sinking into the wet earth. Lena Briggs stood at the edge of the excavation site, staring down at the patch of disturbed soil. 2 sets of remains had been found, one buried shallow, one deeper. Only one bore the trace of time. When the coroner called out, "Female, approximate age 29, Lena felt the chill sink straight into her bones. It wasn't Erin Lowe. Hours later, in the sterile hum of the lab, the dental records confirmed what Lena already knew. Clara Weston, missing since 2012, the first woman Dylan Hart had ever lost. The revelation hit the town like a lightning strike. Headlines screamed "cold case cracked," and "boyfriend under fire," again. Reporters camped outside Dylan's small house, cameras flashing through his front windows. Inside, Dylan sat at his kitchen table, staring at the muted television. His reflection in the screen looked almost calm. Too calm. His hands were clasped, motionless. But his eyes trembled with something raw. Panic, or maybe memory. When the police knocked, he opened the door without a word. "Mr. Hart," Lena said, her tone unreadable. "We need you to come with us." He nodded once, expression blank, and followed. At the precinct, he sat beneath the harsh fluorescent light, wrists resting on the table. "You think I buried her," he said quietly. "I don't think," Lena replied. "I know." He smiled, the edges brittle. "You don't have proof I killed her." "Not yet," she said. "But you're breaking, Dylan. I can see it." His jaw flexed, a flash of defiance rising before it dissolved into silence. As Lena's voice faded, something shifted behind his eyes. Not guilt, but memory. Flashback. The night she died. The year was 2012. The rain had been relentless that night, too, hammering against the windows of their small apartment. Clara had been pacing for an hour, her voice shaking with fury and fear. "You lied to me again," she said, standing by the door. "You said you'd stop seeing her." Dylan leaned against the wall, cigarette burning between his fingers. "You're overreacting, Clara. Don't you dare tell me that," she snapped. "You think I don't see it? The control, the gaslighting?" He cut her off with a bitter laugh. You love the drama. You always need to be the victim. Her hand trembled around her car keys. I'm leaving. He moved fast, too fast. You're not going anywhere. When she turned, he grabbed her arm. She jerked free and the cigarette dropped to the carpet, hissing. Get out of my way, she said, voice cracking. Clara, I love you, he whispered, suddenly soft again, the mask slipping back into place. You just need to calm down. I'm done calming down. Then came the shove. Sudden, violent, instinctive. She stumbled backward, hit the corner of the table. The crack of impact echoed through the small room. Silence followed. Thick, endless. Dylan froze. He hadn't meant to push her that hard. He crouched beside her, shaking her shoulder. Clara? Blood pooled slowly beneath her head, dark and growing. No. No, no. His voice broke. You're fine. You're... But she wasn't. He pressed his hands over the wound, whispering apologies between gasps. He stayed there for hours before realizing she wasn't coming back. And when he finally moved, it was methodical. He wrapped her in a sheet, carried her to the trunk, drove through the rain until the quarry swallowed her whole. He'd told himself it was an accident, told himself the shove didn't count as murder, but the guilt had never stayed buried. It had simply waited for him to repeat it. Back in the present, Dylan sat motionless as Lena laid photographs of the dig site before him. Each one closer, more intimate. The fragments of Clara's life and death unearthed from the soil. You didn't mean to kill her, Lena said quietly, studying his face. Did you? He didn't answer. His eyes glistened, then hardened. She was leaving me, he muttered. She was going to ruin me. That doesn't justify... She knew how to hurt me, he snapped, the chair scraping as he slammed his hands on the table. The mask finally cracked. I loved her and she made me feel like nothing. Lena didn't flinch. You killed her, Dylan, and when that wasn't enough to quiet it, you found someone else to play the part. He exhaled sharply, the rage draining into resignation. You think I wanted any of this? Erin wasn't supposed to be like Clara. She was supposed to fix me. His words hung heavy in the stale air. Lena leaned forward. Then where is she? For the first time, his expression faltered completely. His lips parted, then closed again. He looked away. You wouldn't understand, he said, voice low. Try me. He laughed softly, almost sadly. Some people leave, detective. Others make you do the leaving for them. Before she could respond, his lawyer entered, calling an end to the questioning. The moment was gone. As Dylan was escorted to holding, Lena stayed behind, staring at the photograph spread across the table. Clara's remains, the ring still on her finger, her hair matted with earth. Justice, in some twisted way, had surfaced. But Erin's face lingered in her mind, the second ghost that refused to be found. That night, Lena drove back to the quarry. The rain had returned, soft and steady. She stood near the excavation site, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Beneath the mud and silence, she could almost feel Clara's presence, not just as a victim, but as a warning. When she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. You found the first one, now find me. Her pulse spiked. Erin, she whispered. The quarry behind her seemed to breathe, the air shifting as if the earth itself were listening. Lena tightened her grip on the phone and stepped into the rain again, her flashlight beam trembling over the empty pit where one truth had ended, and another waited to rise. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, a cold, relentless drizzle that turned the sky the color of ash. Detective Marla Grayson sat in her car outside the polished brick office of Dr. Adrian Cross, listening to the faint hum of the windshield wipers. The nameplate beside the frosted glass door read Adrian Cross, Ph.D. Clinical Therapy and Emotional Wellness, a comforting title, wrapped around something far from pure. Inside, the office was all neutral tones and lavender candles. Books lined the walls, the air thick with the faint scent of sandalwood. Dr. Cross greeted her with the kind of controlled charm that only comes from years of studying other people as pain. He was tall, composed, the kind of man who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. "I understand this is about my patient, Lila Monroe," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. "Tragic. What happened to her?" "Missing," Marla corrected softly. "Not happened. Not yet." His smile didn't falter, but something in his jaw tightened. "Of course, missing." Marla studied him as he spoke. The precise way he measured each word, the calculated calm. He claimed their sessions were professional, focused on grief and marital strain after Lila's miscarriage. But when she mentioned finding Lila's handwritten letters, the ones describing fear and betrayal, his eyes flickered just enough to confirm what she already suspected. Back at the station, she reviewed the items recovered from Lila's attic. A small digital recorder labeled session tapes. Evan had said they were part of Lila's therapy homework, reflections she never wanted anyone to hear. But someone had heard them. Someone had used them. Marla pressed play. Lila's voice filled the room, trembling, intimate. "Adrian says I need to let go of the past. But how do I let go when he's part of it now? He says what we have is special, forbidden but healing. I know it's wrong, but when I'm with him I feel like I can breathe again." A pause. Then another recording from weeks later. "He's changed. He gets angry when I cancel a session. He says I'm pulling away, that I'll regret it. Last night I saw him outside my house. I thought I imagined it, but the light in the kitchen was on and he smiled before walking away." Marla turned off the player, her stomach tightening. It wasn't therapy. It was control disguised as care. The next day she confronted Adrian again, this time in the presence of a warrant. She watched him shift from confident to cautious as Tex seized his computer and hard drives. "You're making a mistake," he said evenly. Lila was unstable. She'd fixate on men who tried to help her. I was only keeping her safe from herself. Marla leaned closer. "You recorded her." He didn't deny it. "For therapeutic purposes," he said. "She gave consent." "Did she consent to you sleeping with her?" Silence. When the techs cracked into his encrypted folders, they found dozens of recordings. Some were clinical, ordinary therapy sessions, others weren't. Adrian's voice turned from gentle to possessive, coaxing her into confessions, emotional dependency, and eventually, submission. He told her she was the only one who understood him, that they were meant to heal each other. But the last recording, dated October 28th, shifted everything. Lila's voice was raw, panicked. "I told him I couldn't keep lying to Evan. I told him it had to stop. He said no one would get hurt if I just stayed quiet. I think he means it. I think he's watching me." The recording ended with a scrape of furniture, a sharp intake of breath, and a whisper. "You promised, Lila." Marla froze the playback. The voice wasn't clear, but it was undeniably male, calm, familiar. Meanwhile, Evan's mental state had begun to crumble. He stopped answering calls, missed work, and was seen wandering their darkened house at night, lights flickering from room to room. He called Marla twice in one evening, once to accuse her of protecting Adrian, and once to beg her to tell him if his wife was dead. "She wouldn't just leave me," he said, voice hoarse from crying. "You don't understand her like I do. She'd been trying to fix things. She said she forgave me for everything. You think I don't know about the tapes, about him? She told me she ended it. He took her, didn't he?" Marla wanted to believe Evan's pain was genuine, but she also saw the fury beneath it, the kind that builds over time, slow and acidic, the kind that could snap. As the investigation deepened, the boundary between truth and manipulation blurred. Adrian painted himself as the victim of a fragile woman's obsession. Evan portrayed himself as the grieving husband wronged by them both. And Lila, the woman at the center of it all, was left voiceless, existing only in fragments of her own confessions. That night, Marla played the last of the recovered recordings one final time, alone in her apartment. Lila's whisper echoed through the speakers. He said no one would get hurt. Then the sound of a door opening, footsteps descending, and the faint hum of a machine, steady, mechanical, buried deep beneath static. She remembered the wires running through the Monroe walls, the hidden surveillance network she'd found earlier. Lila's words matched perfectly with that sound. Marla shut off the recording, staring into the dark. She knew what she had to do next. If Lila had been recording her thoughts for him, for Adrian, maybe she'd also recorded her last moments. And if the hum in the background was what Marla thought it was, then the answer wasn't in the attic or the studio. It was somewhere deeper. The storm outside built into a full roar as she grabbed her coat and keys, the last echoes of Lila's voice playing in her mind. "You said no one would get hurt," Marla whispered to the empty room. "Then tell me, Lila, who did?" She stepped into the rain, the glow of her taillights fading into the night as thunder cracked overhead, leading her straight back to the Monroe home, where something unseen waited beneath the floorboards.